think they...
Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the red rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2, Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. Thank you for joining us this morning on Conversations with Big Rich. We have none other than John Currie. John has been around the industry for a long time. Not that you're old, John. It's just that, you were born into the industry, basically. So, how about sharing that that history with us about Currie Enterprises and where it's gone, to today?
Well, there's been a lot of changes lately, but I'll kind of start back. My dad started the company in 1959. My dad started Currie Enterprises, and he worked for a company called Taylor Dunn Manufacturing. And Taylor Dunn Manufacturing made equipment for the poultry industry. So they made like little stand-up electric vehicles to collect eggs with. And this was back in, I think my dad went to work there in, I believe, like 55 or 56. And I was born in 57. So he was in the Air Force, and he was basically an airplane mechanic. And he was over in Korea, and he taught some aircraft mechanics, back in the U.S. as well in the Air Force, stationed out at in Vegas. I forget the name of the Air Force place out there in Vegas, but he was stationed out there. So he would ride his motorcycle back and forth back to California where he was born. And me and my brothers were all born in California. We were all born in Orange County, California. So we kind of grew up. Originally, we lived in Anaheim, and then in 1964, we moved to Placentia, California, where it was nothing but orange groves and oil wells, around us. So it was kind of like heaven for me and my brothers to move there. So we grew up, riding motorcycles, racing motorcycles. We rode horses. We had cows. We lived on a 4-acre, basically orange grove. And my dad had built a sheet metal shop beside that, and that's where he ran Currie Enterprises. And like I said, he started Currie Enterprises in 1959. He also ran that out of Anaheim. And then we moved, he needed more room to expand his business. So we picked up and moved to Placentia, and he built, I think it was a 7,000 square foot sheet metal building to basically what he'd do. He would buy used rear ends and then disassemble them and shorten them up for these electric vehicles for the poultry industry. And then as that business grew, they got into electric vehicles for industry, and then also into golf carts. So he expanded. He built originally the 7,000 square foot building, and then he put a lean-to on both sides of it. So there was probably closer to 10,000 feet under cover. And then as me and my brothers grew up, we started working for my dad, disassembling rear ends. Originally, he would pay us piecework to disassemble rear ends and to clean them. And then as we got older, we actually ran all the machines, the engine lathes and the gear hobs, and all the different machines that we'd use to shorten these rear ends. So that's kind of a brief history. And then, as we were, when we were like in pretty much grammar school, about 6th grade, between 6th and 7th grade, my dad told us, hey, if you guys work this summer, you'll make enough money to buy a motorcycle. I'll buy you guys motorcycles. So me and my brother, my older brother, Charlie basically worked, all summer. So he would buy us a motorcycle at the end of the summer. So, and that motorcycle kind of got us into motorcycles and motorcycle racing. So I was in 7th grade. He bought us like these Kawasaki 90s, and then, made expansion chambers for him. This would have been like 1968 or 69, right in that era. So I was still, I'm just trying to think exactly how old I was and where I was in school. So I would have been like in 7th grade now. So I've got a Kawasaki 90. Me and my brother were in the same grade. So he's older than I am. They held him back one year, and basically I caught up with him. So me and my older brother went to school all the way from basically 2nd grade all the way through high school together. We were in the same grade. And then my younger brother, Ray, which was in business too, when I was a senior in high school, I think he was a freshman in high school, I believe it was. So he caught up to us, and we were all in high school together for 1 year. Kind of give you a background of how we grew up. So anyways, so that kind of got us involved in motorcycles, and we got involved in motorcycle racing off-road. My dad, when we were kids, also had dune buggies. We had Volkswagen dune buggies because we were in and out of wrecking yards buying, we're in for our business. They would also buy like Volkswagens and anything they would find in these wrecking yards that had value. They would buy, Volkswagen engines and trannies and resell them. They would buy Corvair engine and trannies and resell them. They would, every once in a while, they would come home with a complete car that they had bought out of a wrecking yard, and we'd fix it up and drive it in the orange groves and oil fields around Placentia. We had a lot of freedom to do whatever we wanted, because it was, we pretty much lived in the country. And now, that's all, nothing but houses and track homes, and everywhere where we would grow up riding is all, it's all covered. It's where it's orange groves and strawberry fields and whatever, now that's pretty much, it's all houses. And same thing, we had horses. We grew up with, we had Shetland ponies and horses. We would literally get up, on a Saturday morning or during the summer and take off all day on a horse ride. We'd go up through Carbon Canyon, wherever, we when we were at home on the summers, we were pretty much free reign to go any direction we want to do. It wasn't, my dad was working, my mom was home, and me and my brothers could just do whatever we wanted to do, whether it was on our motorcycles, whether it was on horses, whatever we were doing. Just a story I remember just come to my head. When they were building the 91 freeway between Anaheim and Corona,
yep,
we were riding our motorcycles on the 91 freeway. It was a cement highway, 8 lanes wide, that hadn't opened yet. And so we were on that drive, ride our motorcycles from basically Anaheim to Corona. And we got pulled over by a policeman and asked us, "What are you guys doing out here on this freeway?" I go, "Well, it's not open yet. We just thought we'd, ride down it." So that was one of the stories we had when we were kids, and that was me, Charlie, I think Raymond. And Raymond was, like I said, he was about 3 years younger. So he would kind of follow us around and do whatever we were doing, and whatever, trouble we were getting in, he would be right on our heels.
That sounds like a really good upbringing.
It's a lot different today. My kids grew up, my son grew up racing motorcycles, because that's what we did when we were kids. So, I think everybody that's ever done that, they get their kids involved in it. It wasn't as easy for him, because, luckily when he was younger, we actually owned some property in Chino Hills. We owned about 80 acres in Chino Hills. So it was only a few miles from our house. So we could take the kids up there on the weekend and turn them loose and let them ride. They didn't have the free reign like me and my brothers did when we were kids, but we would give them the opportunity to learn how to ride and to do different stuff. Also, when they were, little kids, where we lived in Anaheim. Now I'm skipping over some years because now we're living in Anaheim. Back in Anaheim Hills, my dad had bought property I think in about 1956, he had bought 10 acres in Anaheim. At the time, it was not Anaheim Hills, it was Santa Ana Canyon. Well, he had bought 10 acres, in Santa Ana Canyon, and then in the early 80s, we built homes up there. And now this is after, me and my brothers have been working at Currie for a while. We've owned homes, and he basically went in partners with some developers. This was back in the early 80s. There was kind of another recession. The economy kind of turned, and he got all his property back. They were developing this property. They were putting 9 lots on, I think it was 10 acres or 9 acres or something up there. And it was, I think, minimum half-acre lots, and his partners went bankrupt. So he ended up with all the property back. And he said, you know what? At the time, he goes, I'm just going to give you guys an acre each. He divided the property up into 5 1-acre lots. Me and my brothers actually drew straws for which property we would get. So I actually drew the longest straw, and so I took the property the highest. It was on a hill, so I took the highest lot, which was actually been my dad and then me, and then my older brother Charlie, as you're coming down the hill, and then Ray. Ray drew the shortest straw. But the lots were they were all nice lots. They were all 1-acre lots. They were all graded flat, so they were ready to build on it. And this was in the early to mid 80s. We basically, sold our homes that we were living in and built homes on Anaheim Hills. And me and Charlie and my mom still live there. We live right next to each other in Anaheim Hills. Raymond, in 2012 or 13, when we moved our business from Anaheim out to Corona, he found 9 acres out here in Norco, and then he sold his house in Anaheim and then moved to Norco. So he lives on 9 acres here in Norco. His son Casey built a home on there as well. And then I think Cody, their plan is for Cody to build a home there as well eventually. But right now, Cody just bought a house across the street from him in that same neighborhood.
That's awesome.
So a little bit of history. I know I'm skipping around here from dates, so I'm trying to add some time in there so you know what has gone on. So
no, that's okay, because we'll bouncing around is fine.
Right.
When did the off-road 4-wheel drive happen for the family?
Well, basically, my dad, we had Jeeps and stuff when we were, younger growing up. Just to give you some back history, my dad used to buy a lot of stuff out of the Army surplus and Navy surplus. So that was another side job that we had. We'd go pick up, vehicles and machinery, and we'd fix it up and sell it. He bought a lot of stuff from the Border Patrol. We had the earlier Scouts. He would buy from the Border Patrol, and he would rebuild the engines, fix them up, paint them, and sell them. And that's actually where I learned to paint. I would actually paint a lot of this stuff. So in our little shop there in Placentia, we would actually, strip this stuff down, paint it. My dad would rebuild the engines, whatever. It was just something for him to make an extra buck on the side. But it kept us busy. And we'd paint it and resell Scouts. And then before, I think when I was about 14, he had bought some Jeeps from, I think, Army surplus. And he had actually given me a M38A1 Jeep. And I think he'd given one to my brother. So my brother's, one of my older brother's first cars was this M38A1 with a 4-cylinder in it that he had fixed up. And he would, we actually drove that to high school. And then I had one and I was fixing up. And basically I had built a small block, like a 302 Ford to put in it. And I had the engine, the tranny, and the transfer case adapter, and I was putting this M38A1 together. Now, this was before I had my driver's license, and then I ended up trading that project for a 67 Corvette, another project with a buddy of mine, and then I ended up selling the Corvette, and that, this was early in my when I got my driver's license, so I'm probably like a freshman to a sophomore in high school, And then my dad gave me this old piece of junk Ford truck that he had gotten from Taylor Dunn. It was one of their service trucks. And then I drove that for a few years. And then I think after I got my driver's license, I ended up with a Datsun mini truck that I had fixed up. And so that was kind of my first nice car, was that Datsun mini truck that I kept all the way through high school. So
nice.
Anyway, that was kind of my, back to the four-wheel drive stuff. So that was kind of my first four-wheel, or vehicle I had, and I ended up selling it. But my dad we had a 1963 Jeep station wagon that he put a 350 Chevy in. So we had taken trips to Mexico in that, and we did a lot of exploring the local deserts. That vehicle came from the BLM, so it was gray, and it had that triangle green sticker on the door. And when you bought it from the auction, they painted over the sticker with spray paint. So we took and scraped the paint off the sticker. So we had this gray Jeep station wagon that had BLM stickers on the side of it. And, we'd be driving it around, and people thought we were the BLM. People would come and ask, oh, no, that's just a sticker, whatever.
You wouldn't want to do that nowadays.
No. And then, my dad, it had that overhead cam straight six in it. This one did. And that engine went sour after a while. Then my dad put a V8 in it. And then he put those implement tractor tires on it, the big round ones with ribs.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the first, vehicles that my dad kind of fixed up. This was basically before we even had our driver's license. And that was, one of the first things that we would use to go off-roading in and go out and explore out in the desert was that old Jeep station wagon, which I wish I had it today, because it was actually, a nice piece. It just had the 3-speed manual in it. It was nothing fancy, but it was, it was a cool Jeep that, it's like everything. You always sell the stuff you wish you would have had it back. So
yes.
Then, from there, early, my dad, we belonged to the Orange County Burro Club. And a Burro is a dune buggy, and they were built in Santa Ana. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yep, sure have. My
dad had commissioned to have this Burro built. And the Burro, had like a 1600cc Volkswagen in it. Like I told you, he was buying Volkswagen engines and trannies and stuff out of the wrecking yards. Well, he had taken this stuff over to, the guy's name was Tiny, and dropped it off and had this 4-seat family Burro made. Now you got to remember, I have 3 brothers, so there was 4 of us. So I had 2 seats in the front, the 2 Volkswagen seats in the front, and then a bench seat in the back. And the gas tank was behind that. And me and my 3 brothers would actually sit in that back seat. I think my youngest brother would actually probably sit in my mom's lap, and then me and my other 2 brothers would we'd sit in the back. So that, we got into that. We got involved in that Burro Club. So we'd go on runs out in the desert with the Burro Club, and they kind of introduced us to, going around looking through mining districts and stuff like that. And we did that for years. And we had that Burro all the way through high school, and me and my brothers would drive it everywhere. That was kind of our recreation on the weekends when we were motorcycle racing. We'd take the Burro out and go see where we could get. There was a lot of private property around us. We could go way back in the hills. We'd go up to Silverado Canyon, up into the mountain. We'd actually take that Burro up into the snow. So we've got some adventures we've had with the Burro, but it was usually me and my brother. At this time, we're in high school, and our high school buddies. So you can imagine we beat the heck out of that Burro and had a really good time with it. So then,
great.
As time goes on, when I got out of high school, I bought a 46 Willys flat fender and restored that. And when my first, 2 years of college, I was driving my flat fender with no top on it, with a 4-cylinder engine in it. So I was driving that from Placentia to Fullerton College to go to school. And then I realized, I just parked it out, and there was a dirt field across the street at that time. There's not anymore. I could just park in the field, and it was completely unsecured, but it was a nice little flat fender. And I'd sold that. I'd sold my Datsun pickup. I would buy cars and fix them up and sell them. Like I said, I used to paint stuff for my dad. So I'd buy a lot of junk, fix it up, paint it, and resell it. And I think back in those days, my average is I would keep something about 9 months. I'd buy it, get it cleaned up, get it to where everything was working, paint it, and then sell it. And then I'd go buy something else. And I had a couple nice Broncos. I had the nicest Bronco I had a 1974 Strop Bronco that was an automatic with a 302 and air conditioning.
Nice.
And then that was a super nice Bronco. Like I said, another vehicle I wish I wouldn't have sold. Sold that to a good buddy of mine because at this time now I'm trying to get money to buy a house, and this would have been it was 1978. So I had that Strop Bronco, and I needed money to put a down payment on a house because my dad told me, hey, well, you guys need to start investing your money. You need to buy some real estate, whatever. So the reason I remember the date 1978 because the house was $78,000. So I ended up buying a little 2-story house in Anaheim, never lived in it, and rented it out. But I sold that Bronco. I probably had 2 or 3 vehicles. I think it was a Bronco. I think I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee that was a Border Patrol that I fixed up and painted. And then I sold everything I had and no car to drive. We always had something laying around that we could drive, some piece of junk. Like there was an early Datsun pickup my dad had. It was like a shop truck he bought it from an auction or something. So we always had something to drive. So after that, I had bought kind of a junky Bronco. I remember I bought it, had no hood on it, and it was kind of like a medium green color. So that was another one I fixed up and drove that one for a while. And I remember the frame or something was bent on it. It wasn't a nice Bronco. So I kind of fixed that one up and sold that and got to where I could afford a better car. And then, because at this point now, me and my brothers after high school, we're basically working full time for my dad. Out of high school, I had actually started my own business. Although I was working for my dad, we only built rims for Taylor Dunn only. After I sold my Datsun pickup, I had bought a 56 Ford F-150 that I was fixing up. So there was a place in Buena Park called SoCal Pickups. So I was going over to getting parts. You could take the 9-inch rim out of a 1957 to 59 Ford pickup, and it would bolt right into a 1956 Ford pickup. Or it'd actually be 53 to 56, I believe, or 52 to 56. That 9-inch Ford was a direct bolt-in. So I started selling rims to SoCal Pickups. It was just kind of a little side business I'd make a couple extra $100. They would buy a rim for me like every week. So I'd rebuild a rim and take it over there and sell it to the SoCal Pickups. So that was my side business because, at that time, we probably had about 5 people working at Currie Enterprises, and I ran the machine shop. So I stayed in the shop all the time and ran the machine shop. And my older brother, Charlie, he would be out on the road buying rims. So he was going into wrecking yards and buying rims. And then him and my dad at one point were selling 800 rims a month. So
wow,
you could imagine we had a hard time buying enough rims to keep up. So my dad and my brother would be on the road trying to buy rims, and then my job was to run the machine shop, run the teardown operation, and then when my brother wasn't on the road, he would work in the shop as well. And then I kind of started that little side business with the rear ends, and then I hooked up with a couple street rod shops as well. So I had SoCal Pickups, I had California Street Rods, I had TCI, and now my little side business is I might have been doing 10 or 20 rims every week, supplying them to these street rod shops. So I was doing good. I had plenty of cash in my pocket. I was working full time for my dad. And then, I think my brothers were getting a little jealous because I was making money. So my dad approached me and says, hey, well, there's more to the story. In the early 80s, Yamaha came along and they introduced a golf cart to the golf cart industry, the Yamaha golf cart. Well, half of the rims that we were selling were going into golf carts at that time. So we're doing 800 rims a month. 400 of those are going into golf carts. The other 4 are going into industrial vehicles. So we basically lost that golf car market. So our volume went from basically 800 rims a month down to 400 rims a month. And that basically at that point is when my dad approached me and says, hey, you know, why don't we expand on the automotive aftermarket? And since me and my brothers are more, you know, we were kind of more interested in automotive aftermarket anyways, just because we're off-roaders and wherever we, you know, the stuff we had grown up doing, we started, you know, getting involved in that. And so there's more to the story too. Remember Tom McMullen from,
Yes.
So Tom McMullen showed up at our shop one day in his hot rod and basically said, hey, you know, how come you guys don't advertise and selling rents to, you know, to other hot rodders through the magazine? And we're going, well, we never really thought of it, you know. He goes, yeah, you know, why don't you give me a rim for my hot rod and then we'll do an ad up for you and put it in the magazine. So this would have been back in probably in the early 80s when that all happened. And that kind of launched us into the automotive aftermarket. And then basically my dad kind of made a deal with me. He goes, hey, you know, I'm going to pay you a little bit more money and we're going to buy your business back out of you. And it's all going to be under Currie now instead of my little enterprise on the side. Now it brought it back into Currie. So now we're still doing the 400 rims a month for the industrial rear end market, but now we're also getting involved with all the automotive aftermarket. So the hot rod industry back in those days, I'll give you some back history too. This is when everybody was still wanting to build 32 Fords, Model A's, you know, Model T, you know, T-buckets. So that market was super strong at that point. You know, there's still people building muscle cars like Camaros and Chevelles, but they weren't as popular yet. You know, at this point, there was the V8 mini trucks were popular, with people doing V8 conversions to their mini trucks. So we're building 9-inch rims for them. People are building V8 Vegas, so we're doing a 9-inch rim for a V8 Vega. And we got involved in kind of the drag racing market too. I remember we build rims for the Chevelles and the Monte Carlos and the Cutlasses and all those cars. We started building 9-inch rims for all those cars. So we're moving along, and basically our product line was developed by what people were asking for. If we had enough people ask for a rim for a V8 Vega, we would go out and figure out how to build a rim for a V8 Vega. So it just kind of pushed us forward. Since, you know, me and my brothers were, you know, knew welding and fabrication, you know, from just growing up and building stuff, you know, we just kind of kept going forward. So in 1985, and you remember, at this point, we're still in our Orange Grove, our sheet metal building, and we're shipping from there. So all of a sudden, everything changes. Our phone is ringing off the hook. It rings right into my mom's house. So me and my brothers, we moved out and bought our own homes, and we're living, you know, I'd bought another house. I lived around the corner, you know, because, you know, I thought, well, I'm just going to keep investing in real estate as much as I can with the little money I had. And my older brother, he lived down the street. My younger brother, when this first started, he wasn't even in the business yet, you know, so he wasn't. I think he was still going to school or something. So that would have been Ray. You know, me and my older brother are breaking our butt, you know, doing the welding and whatever we're doing to get this thing going. And then my dad actually had other plans for my other brother, and they were going to buy a shoe shop from his sister. So my one younger brother, Ray, went and worked at that shoe shop for one summer, and then they figured out the shoe shop was making more money than they thought. So my aunt backed out and didn't sell it. So then Ray was actually going to become a cobbler. You know, he was going to own the shoe shop or something. So then after that happened, he came back to work at Currie. And Ray was probably a little more educated than most of us, although he learned how to he knew how to run all the machines, or most of them. He didn't work in the machine shop as much as me and my brother did. But anyways, so now all three of us are working there, and we're, you know, like I said, the phone's ringing off the hook, and my mom's answering it in the middle of the night and everything else, and telling me, hey, you'll have to call back in the morning, you know, we're closed right now, whatever. So in 1985, we've got the automotive thing is pretty much going wide open. My dad's still, you know, basically the owner of it. He finds a piece of property down the street from Placentia that it was in an auction. It was right on the side of I think he bought it from the Water District. So he buys this little narrow strip of property that's about 2 acres out of this auction, and we were living on 4 acres. That piece of property I was telling you, the Anaheim Hills, he was building a home up there. So he sold the 4-acre piece of property, and we built a 20,000 square foot shop on that piece of property he had bought from, I believe it was the Water District. On that 20,000 square foot building, tilt-up building now, we moved to the corner of, it was the corner of Tustin Avenue and Orangethorpe. And we moved to the other side of the train tracks. So we went from Placentia side to the Anaheim side. So we took over the back 10,000 square feet of that building, and we rented out the front 10,000 square feet. And basically, when we moved to that building, that's basically my dad, after we got moved in that building, my dad pretty much retired and said, hey, I don't need, I've already made my money. I'm giving this business to you guys, and you guys could do with whatever you want to do with it, He goes, I've never put anything in it, so I don't expect to hardly, to get anything back. All I want you to do is, I think we paid for all of his projects. This was in '85. Everything he was working on, building Jeeps and hot rods and whatever, probably paid his health insurance and stuff. And there was actually an amount of money that we were supposed to pay him every year. We never actually paid him that. All we did was pay for all of his expenses. Everything he did, we would pay for.
Nice.
And then now at this point, I have 3 brothers that are partners in the business. There's one younger brother that nobody really hears nothing about. He was always the black sheep of the family. But my dad had somehow made him a 10% partner. But he was kind of just one of those black sheep screw up, always, something's going haywire with him. But he worked there. He was like a truck driver. He wasn't good enough to be a welder. He wasn't good enough to do assembly, but he could, there's more of a story of that. He was in an accident when he was like right out of high school when he was 18, was in a coma for a month. So he was messed up before, but he was really messed up after that. But he was functional, but not 100%. But he was a 10% partner in our company now, and we didn't understand it because he'd never contributed anything. And in my dad's eye, well, the company's not worth anything. He's only 10%. What's that going to hurt? So anyways, when my dad pretty much turned over the business to us, this would have been in 1985, the business was making at that point about $700,000 a year. And it was me and my basically 3 brothers, and there might have been 10 of us total with our employees working there. It might not have been that much. Now we got a 10,000 square foot building. We got some room to expand. So we bought some more machinery. When me and my brothers took it over, we invested more money into it. We didn't just take what it gave it. We figured it was going to go. We had no choice but to make it work because this was our deal. So we started moving forward. Just to give you an idea, well, in 1985, we were doing $690,000. That was 1985. When in 2006, right before the economy was crashing, the economy crashed at the end of 2007.
Right.
In 2006, we did $14 million that year.
Wow. Very good.
So, but that would have been what, 20 years? Let's see, from 85, so 95 would be 10, so 05, that's 20 years. It took us to do that. And so now we're in the whole building. So, in 2000, basically 2007, we're, by then we'd taken over the whole 20,000 square foot building. We're running out of room. We're looking for places to expand. But to go back to the four-wheel drive thing.
I do remember that building. We
that was our main,
quite a few times.
Yeah, that was our main building. That's where Currie Enterprises basically grew, became the company that they are today or whatever. I'm trying to think back. Back in the mid 80s, after we got settled into that building, we're in there, we're making money, we're doing good. We're still involved in off-roading. My dad had become friends with Tom McMullen Publishing. And they were, doing different stuff, traveling around the world. Tom had started a magazine, Four-Wheel Drive and Sport Utility. So Tom was now we have this long working relationship with Tom, which there was good and bad to it. If you knew Tom, he was kind of crazy. He could do a lot of things. He had money and he liked to do a lot of things. And my dad, at this point, my dad was completely retired. So my dad him and Tom they were both into hot rods. They were both into Jeeps. So basically back in about 85, in that range, 86, my dad and Tom went to Moab. My dad had a Bronco. Tom had I think a Jeep of some sort. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a Jeep. Maybe it was something else. But anyways, they had heard about the Easter Jeep Safari in Moab. This was back in the mid-'80s, about maybe 85, 86. So they went to Moab. My dad took one of his Broncos, because we used to be big into Broncos back in the days. I had Broncos. My dad had Broncos. My brothers had Broncos. And we'd like to go down to Mexico because the Broncos worked good on the roads down there. So we had some Broncos. Well, my dad took his Bronco and went to Moab. The Bronco worked okay, but he really realized that, hey, it wasn't geared right for crawling. When he got on those rocks, I think the one he had was a manual transmission. It only had 350 gears in it. And he goes, yeah, it's not geared low enough. We've been involved in off-roading, and, we'd raced dune buggies and Baja and done different stuff. But that's when he got involved in the rock crawling part of it. My dad came home from Moab we had went out to TDS back in there, and we'd taken our Broncos and stuff, and we realized the Broncos were like 1,000 pounds heavier than a Jeep. And on some of that soft climbs, the Jeeps could outperform a Bronco. So we came back, and we'd been into Jeeps and stuff too. Like I said, I had my little flat fender. My dad said, well, hey, we should go buy some Jeeps and fix up some Jeeps. So I bought an 81 CJ7. My dad had like an 82 CJ7. Raymond bought like a Golden Eagle with a V8 in it, the all-wheel drive one. And then my brother Charlie bought I think it was around an 81 or 82 CJ7. And we started fixing these Jeeps up. My dad put a fuel-injected V8 in his. Raymond didn't, since his had a V8, he had bought I think it had a 318s or something they came in, but he bought a 360 and put it in his. And then my older brother had just put a small block Chevy carbureted in his. And then at that time, I was into boats. So when I built my house in Anaheim Hills, I had sold my day cruiser that I had, and I had a big block Chevy out of that day cruiser that when I sold it, I didn't sell it with the engine. I put that big block Chevy in my CJ7. So the big block Chevy with a turbo 400 behind it, and then I put a 9-inch behind that, and that's really when I built a 9-inch front end for that, and that was really kind of the start of us getting heavily involved into the Jeep market. That 9-inch front, my brothers both told me I was crazy, that's too big it's too big, it won't work, all these reasons it wouldn't work. Also, everybody told me I can't put a big block Chevy in a Jeep, that wouldn't work either. But, so that just made me more determined to do it. So I had a big block Chevy, I had a 9-inch in it, and then I built a 9-inch front. That kind of started us down that stuff for building stuff for Jeeps. Because when people seen, through Tom's magazine that we were doing this stuff to Jeeps, we started selling stuff, like a front end and rear end for a Jeep now. We weren't just doing a rear end, we'd do a front end and rear end. And basically we would just take all the Dana 30 stuff and weld the knuckles onto a 9-inch front end and then put 31 spline axles in it with a bigger joint on it, but use all the CJ outers. So all the steering and everything worked just like a CJ. So basically it would bolt right into your CJ. It just needed bigger U-bolts. It used a 3-inch U-bolt instead of a 2.5-inch U-bolt or whatever. So that kind of got us into the Jeep market right there. And on that Jeep thing, I started developing other parts for the Jeep. I was kind of always the innovator and product guy. The products we developed for that Jeep, that kind of got us into, and to go back, that's actually where we got into the product line of Jeep, when we started building products for Jeep. But we made the greasable shackles that use the urethane bushing with the bolts with the grease fittings on them. and then the toe shackles so you could hook your tow bar right to the shackles. Those were all original Currie products. Some other products that came from that Jeep was the twin stick shifter for the Dana 300. That was my product. So we sold thousands of those back in the day. And because they had the Dana 300 in them from, I think, 1981 all the way up to 1986, before they came out with the YJ. They used Dana 300. So we sold a bunch of the twin stick shifters for those. And another thing that we made was the replacement knobs for the CJ7s. Everything was cable operated, and the plastic knobs would pull right off the dash. So we made aluminum replacement knobs, and those were just some of our early products that we had for the CJ. So that kind of got us in our brochure. I remember we had this little 8.5 by 11 fold up deal. When people would order a front and rear end, we'd send this little fold up, would have all the products that we made for the CJs. People would call back and order everything on that we had for CJs. They would order the shackles, the twin stick shifter, the knobs. And then we got into doing, front and rear bumpers. We never made leaf springs for the CJs. When we got into leaf spring stuff, it was on the YJ. So when the YJ came out, we just expanded that product line. We made shackles for the YJ. We made the slip yoke eliminator kit. We made those for the YJ. We made front and rear ends for the YJ. Now we're moving along. The YJ came out in 87, I think was the first one, 86, it would have been 87. So we started building a lot of stuff for YJ. So I sold my CJ, so I built a YJ with the LT. At that time, the motor was the LT1. So I built a YJ with the LT1 in it. And then we developed leaf springs for the YJ. We had the steering gear braces for the CJ and the YJ. All that was, basically a product line. It was a division of Currie other than the rear ends. We made the rear ends. All the other stuff was it was all stuff that we were building for our own Jeep. That's what it was. It was stuff that we thought that we needed, and we just offered it to our customers. And it was all the customers offered to was the customers that we were selling rear ends to. And by this time, we're advertising heavily in the magazines. I mean, in all the different magazines. It was a lot different back in those days. So we had Four-Wheel Drive and Sport Utility magazine, and then Peterson's magazines and Off-Road, all those all the different magazines. And I didn't do the advertising. That was all, Raymond was kind of the advertising guy. He's the one that decided what magazines we were going to advertise in and all that. But at that time, I met Phil Howell. And Phil Howell, when I talked to him first on the phone, he was running a tour company out of Palm Springs. Okay. So he was working for one of the hotels down, I think the Marriott, and he was doing Jeep tours, taking people out in Jeeps and showing them the desert. And he would do these personally. And he called me up, and he was, Phil, he's kind of an eccentric guy. And then, and he wanted, he needed some Jeep parts, and he was, telling me, hey, I run this, I do this Jeep tours down here, and we ended up he was trying to buy one of my Jeeps, but I don't think he had enough money. So anyways, I ended up building some rims for one of he had bought a Jeep that was burn up, and then he bought rims for front and rear ends and a bunch of our product and put on that Jeep and built it. And that's when he had his tour company. He was the director of entertainment for the Marriott, now that I think about it. And then he ran that tour company out of there, but that's what he was doing down there. He was actually a DJ. Wow. At the time. So you need to talk to Phil.
Oh, he's on my list.
Because he was in the Air Force. He was like an F1 pilot or something as well. He has a long backstory behind him as well. So that's where me and Phil, we started communicating back and forth and doing stuff. And then Tom McMullen was looking for somebody to work at the magazine. And I suggested Phil Howell. And I go, hey, I know this guy runs a tour company. He just lost his job at the Marriott. He's looking for something else to do. And then that's where Phil Howell got to work. He went to work for Four-Wheel Drive and Sport Utility magazine.
Nice.
So there's a little history for you. And then I'm the one that actually, turned Mr. McMullen over to Phil. Phil worked there for a long time. Well, McMullen Publishing was only right down the street from Currie Enterprises at the time. So McMullen Publishing was where the old Donaby Jeep was to be, or it used to be, it was, before Donaby, it was, who's the other old Jeeper? I'm trying to think of his name. I can't think of his name. But anyways, they were just down, they were about maybe 2 miles down the street from us. So Phil would come over and have lunch with us a couple times a week. So me and Phil had a good relationship, and that got me involved in like almost every project, Jeep project, Phil was doing for the magazine back in the day, we were involved in. Matter of fact, I built him a LT1 YJ. When I built my LT1 YJ, we built actually 2 of them. I built him one, and I built myself one. How he paid for it was he got all the parts. He got me the engine and tranny from Chevy. That's how he paid for me to do the conversion on his. So, and that's how I, paid for mine. Like normal, you're trying to do everything with nothing.
Yep.
You're swapping out labor for parts, and that was my deal. I built this Jeep for Phil, then he got me the parts to build mine. That was back, I'm trying to think what year my YJ was, but I think my YJ was a 92, I believe. And then Phil basically had bought a brand new YJ, and he got 2 Corvette engines, 2 700 R4 trannies, and all the adapters, and everything, and then I did the conversion on both of those Jeeps. So now we're up into the mid 90s, let's say. So everything's going strong, and Phil, we got the magazines. We're working a lot with the magazines. We're selling a lot of stuff. We're still heavily involved in the Hot Rod magazine, or with the hot rods. Back in those days, we're just basically just working our butt off. We're building stuff and getting out the door as fast as we can.
Now, I know that Phil, because I've already interviewed at this point Ranch Pratt. And so
right.
Phil had come up with the idea of a rock crawling series and competition.
Yeah.
He was so busy doing the other things, and he had a conversation with Ranch about that. And Ranch was like, well, I want to do it. And I guess they had started Terraflex. He was one of the original partners in Terraflex. Yeah. And he thought that was a great way to advertise their suspension company. So he got involved with, he took the ARCA, from the idea from Phil, brought it to life. At the same time, then we got
Bob Hazel back.
Yeah, Bob Hazel with the Warren Nationals or Super Winch or something.
It was the BF Goodrich rock crawling champ. I have one of the trophies or something from it. Says exactly what it is.
Well,
the first rock crawling thing that we got involved with would have been, I believe it was about the end of 1998.
Yes.
That Bob Hazel was putting on an event in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
The very first one.
And I think, that was the very first one. It was the BFG National Rock Crawling Championship or something. I think I have a trophy or something where it says exactly what it was. And then we had gotten wind of it and wanted to compete in it. And then a lot of friends that we had hooked up with, or people that we were already jeeping with in Moab and stuff, friends we'd made along the way, like Jeff Wagner, which his nickname was Rookie. And Joel Randall, Morris Hansen. These were all rock crawler guys that, were building Jeeps. And Morris Hansen had a YJ with a Dodge, the V10 in it. And Joel Randall, those guys were all out of Nebraska. And the reason we even met those guys, we were jeeping in Moab, and Joel was there with his daughter, and I was there with my daughter, Amanda, and they're both the same age. And they started hanging out together. And that's really how the relationship with Joel started. And Joel Randall was friends with Rookie and Morris Hansen. And those guys would all hang out together. That group kind of got connected with the guys from Farmington. Then we had Jim Peterson, good friend of mine from Farmington.
Harold
Off. So that group, that was kind of the group. There was actually a club. And I don't know if you remember, it's called Our Club.
Yep.
There was no actual club. It was just called Our Club. It was just a group of people that they got together and they called it our club. And that was Joel and Harold and all those guys. It was our club.
Pat Gramillion.
So, yeah, Pat Gramillion was in that group. You know, it's hard for me to remember all the names. When my dad was out doing a lot of off-roading, that was the group he'd go with. You know, we were still back, trying to make money in the shop. They would go on all these different adventures in different places. So that was the group. And that was before, kind of the rock crawling championships actually started. But the first rock crawling thing we did was, that, like I said, that BFG rock crawling championship in Farmington, New Mexico, and was, organized by Bob Hazel. And none of us really knew what we were getting into, going there. We just knew, hey, it's an opportunity for us to go out and show our ability, and the ability of our vehicles off-road. So, we showed up there with a TJ. And there's an interesting story about that. That TJ had the very first anti-rock sway bar on it. So me and my dad competed. My dad at the time, I think he's either 65 or 68. I can't remember.
Wow.
And there's more to that story. My dad had just found out that he had prostate cancer. And he had already set up, I believe he had already set up to have the operation. But he just found out, just shortly before that he had that. So my dad was there spotting for me. Jeff Wagner and Morris Hansen, I think, teamed up. And Joel Randall had teamed up with some, I can't remember all the guys' names. There was also another guy from that Nebraska area, too, that they were, the teams, and a lot of those guys that we knew. So we were kind of competing against a lot of people we knew. And I had already met Shannon Campbell. I had met Shannon Campbell a couple years ago at SEMA. He had Pinky at SEMA a couple years before that, maybe only a year before that. I had met Shannon at SEMA, so I already kind of knew Shannon. And then Randy Ellis. You remember Randy Ellis?
Oh, yeah.
He was a buddy of Shannon's.
Yep.
So they may have, I can't remember if I think they competed separately. Randy had like an off-road racing Jeep, I think he brought. And Shannon was there in Pinky. And then he had, remember, I think they called him Mikey, Shannon's friend that was spotting. Yeah. So anyways,
Mike Dahl or something like that. D-A-H-L. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, they were all, we'd kind of known them, didn't know them well, never actually went wheeling with that group of guys, and that was, and there was a lot more guys that showed up at that first rock crawling championship.
Absolutely.
And we, me and my dad ended up finishing second overall in that. And Jeff Wagner and Morris Hansen ended up finishing first.
Right.
And then after that, that's when Jeff and I teamed up and we started competing in some of the different rock crawling championships because, Morris didn't have the time to do it. He had he had a regular job. Joel was a farmer in Nebraska. So Joel had a little bit more time. So, I think he was partners with his brother, so he could, take off from his farming business in Nebraska. So Joel came out and competed a lot. Morris Hansen didn't because he had a regular job, but every once in a while when we needed somebody, we'd call on Morris to come out. Hey, can you come out and help us? That was the very early days of rock crawling. Jeff and I teamed up. The very first year we competed in the Jeep we called the Rocky Road. And we competed, which was a red modified TJ. And we competed for the first year in ARCA. We did, Bob Hazel had, I think, maybe two different events that year. He had one in Las Cruces and one in Johnson Valley.
Yep.
So we competed in both of those. Jeff spotted for me the one in Johnson Valley. So that's where Jeff and I, formed a partnership. And then the whole first year of ARCA, which I think ARCA started like early in '99, I believe.
That's correct.
And ended in 2000, or at the end of '99 or early 2000. And so Jeff and I competed in the Rocky Road, which was basically a stock TJ on 35-inch tall tires with high pinion 9 inches in it, front and rear. It had the anti-rock sway bar in the front, and there was I had some other like little things that we had put on it. We had this thing we called the secret weapon, which was an air-operated limit strap that went to the front suspension. So when you're climbing something really steep, we could pull down the front suspension. People do it with winches. We did ours with an air activator, so it would only pull on the cable so far, and then it had a little bit of spring in it. But a lot of people have done it with winches. They would put the winch cable down to the front axle and limit their travel, so it would hold the front end going down when you're going up.
They're still doing that front and rear winches.
Yeah,
yep.
But mine was, I actually had an air cylinder mounted to the frame underneath the car with a cable that ran down the frame down to the front housing, and then what it would do, it might have been like a 6-inch deal. It would just pull on that strap and limit the travel down. Instead of like the winch, you could pull the front end down. All this would do was like take up the slack in the front end, so it couldn't go down any further than it was.
Nice.
So, and there was a lot of stuff that came out of rock crawling, how the Jeeps actually worked, with the different lockers. We were sponsored by Detroit Locker, so we always had Detroit lockers in ours. There was a lot of technology and stuff, along with that. So I basically did the rock crawling with Jeff. We did it in, I think, all of '99, and then in 2000, I built the Fire Ant.
Yep,
and
I remember.
So in 2000, we come in second at Farmington, and then the first year in ARCA, we competed that whole year in the Rocky Road. While we're competing in the Rocky Road, I was building the Fire Ant. So the Fire Ant originally just started. It was a burn up TJ I had that it was just a bunch of junk I was putting together out of pieces. And then me and my dad were at SEMA, and I think this would have been the end of 2000 at the SEMA show, and we were in the Jeep booth, and the guy that was running Jeep at the time, or their marketing guy, offered to give us a Grand Cherokee. So we basically took the engine and tranny and stuff out of that Grand Cherokee, and that was the drivetrain for the Fire Ant. And that was that overhead cam V8. It was a 4.7 V8 that they had in the Grand Cherokee. This was when Jeep was owned by Mercedes.
Okay.
So it was actually the Mercedes engine. They had a name for it, and I forget what it was. But that overhead cam V8 ended up in the Fire Ant. And then the next year, which I believe would have been 2001, Jeff and I competed in the Fire Ant, and then we won the ARCA championship that year in the Fire Ant.
Right.
And then we competed the next year in the Fire Ant. The next year after that wasn't nearly as competitive. There was a lot more people building, full-on buggies, and Fire Ant was pretty much just another modified TJ. It still had a TJ frame, or the front half of a TJ frame, and still a 2-seat, still had a body on it. It was highly modified, but it was not. It still had, the steering. It still had a steering gear in there with a ram assist. It didn't have hydro, the full hydro steering and stuff in it. And at that time, we were doing so many events a year. I was kind of getting to the point where, hey, I'm spending so much time rock crawling. Either I need to do this 100%. I'm on the road too much. I need to, at that time, I was getting to the point where I was just spending too much time doing it. I figured I need to either go 100% or I need to get out of it. So
Right.
We had competed, I think, for 2 years straight, and then I pretty much retired out of rock crawling, and that would have been like 2002 or something like that, or the end of 2000. Yeah, I think it was the end of 2002.
I met you in Johnson Valley at the Warren Nationals, I believe.
That was Bob Hazel's event that he did there.
Yes, Bob Hazel did. And then the next event, I believe, was the first ARCA event that I went to.
Was that in Farmington?
No, it was the Arizona. It was down there.
Oh, yeah.
Lawrence Junction area.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah, that was.
And then after that, it was Cedar City.
Okay, yeah.
Cedar City I was the club president in Cedar City at the time. So we helped host the event. And that's how I got to really know, all of you guys that were kind of the players in that. And then I moved away from Cedar City in 2000, came back to Northern California to Placerville, And I started Cal Rocks in 2001 with an event called Put Up or Shut Up. And Chris Durham and, Mike Schaefer and Lance Clifford and a bunch of the guys, Ted LeBaron, all these guys showed up. We had 42 cars, and that was the first Cal Rocks event. And then in 2002, we started our first series, and that was in Lucerne at the Lions Pride Park. It was the Lions gun shooting range. And from then, I wanted to create 3 different classes. We had the unlimited class, a pro mod class, and a stock or mod stock. And I was trying to figure out how to limit the mod stock, create a way to limit that car. And you and I sat and talked, and you came up with the idea, and it was phenomenal. The frame, they had to keep the stock steering location.
Right, yeah.
And that naturally limited the class. So we still run those rules in that mod stock. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, when they went to the hydraulic steering, it really changes the dynamic of the car. Well, yes. And another thing that I had basically retired. We never competed in the Cal Rocks because I was doing so many events per year. Right. I was still trying to run a company at home or help my brothers run a company. And I kind of felt guilty going and doing all this stuff when my brothers were home working. But then again, when they would go do stuff in Mexico, like they raced the Baja, I would stay. I wouldn't go to Mexico because, I was already involved in the rock crawling thing. So, they were doing the higher speed, like stuff in Mexico, and I was doing the slower speed stuff like rock crawling. So, but I was doing it so much, I got to the point I was feeling guilty doing it because I think ARCA, I know the one year we did like 9 events in 1 year, which is a lot of events because every event was like a week long. I mean, you didn't just show up for the weekend. We would show up there a couple of days early and it was usually a day's drive to get there. So anyways, I never competed in the Cal Rocks events only because I was so heavily involved in ARCA and figured, well, we got to focus, on this one event. And that was kind of my focus. Hey, when we won our championship at ARCA that year, Jeff and I actually went to Farmington the whole week prior and did nothing but go out every day in that Jeep. So when we came down to the year we won the championship in the Fire Ant, we basically ran away with that event. After the first day, we were like so far ahead. By the second day, there was nobody that could catch us. So I don't know if most people realize that. The second day, we made a bunch of big mistakes. It was all because we were leading. We weren't chasing at that point. We were leading it, and we were just trying to be too conservative and almost threw the whole thing away. So, but it was great times. Jeff and I we got along good and it worked well. And we both kind of knew, if we put 100% effort in it, that we could win the thing. The next year after that, it was like I said, we competed in the Fire Ant again. It wasn't as competitive because a lot of the vehicles were stepping up. And basically, I sold that vehicle to Jeff, and then he got another partner to run it. And then I was still going to the events. I did some stuff with ESPN there for about a year where I was like a co-host on their TV show that they did a show about rock crawling. So I did that, and I went out to the events, and, after I think I got out of it, we started sponsoring Shannon Campbell. Yes. And Shannon had come to me and said, hey, what do you want me to build for a car? And I actually drew a car on a deal, with the engine in the back of the car and the rear end's upside down in the car. That was the first, I don't remember if you remember that car, but they competed in it in Farmington. And I think they called it the Duck because it had kind of a funny looking front end that kind of just curved down like a duck bill. Yep. And you sat in the center of the car. So it wasn't like the low CG cars where you sit beside the engine. This car, you actually sat over the top of the tranny. So it was a little taller. And it was, at this point, it was still a 2-seat car. It wasn't a single-seat car. And they competed in Farmington in that. And I remember going to that event, and I was actually going around, I wasn't competing, but I was there. I was going to each obstacle ahead of them and watching the obstacle, and I would come back and tell them, this is what you need to do. And I remember there was one obstacle that everybody was timing out on. And I stood there and watched that obstacle. And I told everybody to get max points on an obstacle. Take the points and finish the obstacle. And I think max points at that time was like 40 points.
Yes.
And if I told them, if you just take the points and finish the obstacle, get through it with 30 or 20, whatever it is, and you finish, you're going to be 20 points ahead of everybody else. And that's basically what they did. They just drove over the cones and finished the obstacle. But nobody got it. They figured they had to get through it without touching the cone, and they would time out on the obstacle. They'd never get through it.
All that strategy.
And I think they ended up winning that event in that car. I think it was the only time they actually won a rock crawling event in that car. And then the next year, John Nelson and stuff came out with his Volkswagen cars, and they started building like the offset drivetrain car where you sat down beside the tranny, the really low cars. That was pretty much John Nelson kind of started that. And then the other thing that happened after I got out is they started running media in the tires, whether it was water. They went through all kinds of media, lead shot, different things. And then after a while, they just let them say, you remember the tires would cut open and all the lead shot would run out on the rocks.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So then they had to go back and limit that. Say, hey, you can run water. There's nothing else you can run but water. But there was some people were running lead. Some people were running. There was some different stuff. But I was already out of it before that happened because I never really agreed with running any media in the tires because to me it changed the whole dynamic of the vehicle. It doesn't at that point. It didn't work like a Jeep or like a regular car anymore. Because once you put the lead in the tires, it changes the whole dynamic of the way the vehicle works. And when something goes bad, it usually goes bad a lot worse. Because now you have each tire that weighs 300 pounds are flipping around, and where you've seen, like rear ends get pulled right out of the car because the tires had, 300 pounds of water in each tire. And like I said, I was already out of it by that time. But when John Nelson started building that car, because we helped him on that first car, he kind of said, I'm going to ruin the sport of rock crawling as you know it. That's what he told us. And we're the ones that came up with the idea of turning the rear ends upside down in the car to make it, so that you can put the drivetrain in the back. All came from us because that's stuff we had thought of doing in a regular Jeep to get the ground clearance, but the engine was, pointing in the wrong direction. So, but anyways, yeah. And they did a great thing. He came out there, and thinking back out of it, I should have partnered up with him and probably could have at the time. But I had already been into it, for a long time. And so he had, John Bondurant from All Pro, basically, I don't know how they partnered up or how he funded it or whatever, but basically, got John Bondurant involved, and they went on to make history with that car. Well, now the newer cars with the portal stuff in it is, they're just completely amazing cars now.
They're going smaller and smaller and smaller axles and transfer cases because with all that gear reduction on the outside, they can get away with the lighter weight and smaller material so that they can, because of that gear reduction, they don't have the tendency to break as much stuff on the inside.
Yeah, so,
kind of going back in the opposite direction.
No,
so
it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all innovative, and what's great is that it helps the aftermarket because we always knew that the racers were being followed by the spectators and the enthusiasts, and even though those enthusiasts may not become racers or drivers or competitors, they wanted their trail rigs to be as capable as possible.
Right. Well, you remember back when this started back in the late 90s, people didn't run beadlocks on their recreational rigs.
Nope. Nobody
ran beadlocks. Beadlocks for race cars. We didn't start running beadlocks on our rigs until we got into competition rock crawling.
Yes.
And then now everybody thinks they have to have beadlocks to go off road. That's how much it's changed. Changed the way things have happened. There was only a couple companies that even made beadlocks back in those days. You had to go to. It was Champion. We used Champion beadlocks, which was the guy out of, he was in Fresno, and they ended up moving to Elsinore, and then he went out of business. But the first beadlocks we bought, you sent wheels to the guy, and the guy would, weld the ring onto them. Nobody really made anything. I think there was one of the companies that, early on, it might have been the guys from Ultra Wheel that were actually making some beadlocks, but you could only buy them in like a couple sizes. They were really made for just like short course racing and stuff. They really didn't have nothing for rock crawling.
Yeah, there was a guy out of the Midwest, I think it was MRT, he called the company or something, and he was doing, it was all steel rims. And
those are the steel beadlocks, yeah.
Yep.
Wasn't Greg working for him, Greg Bulkey and those guys?
I think possibly, yes. Greg's on my list as well.
Yeah, I think when they first came to some of the rock crawling events, that I think he might have been working for those guys. As I remember, I'm not sure about that, but those first rock crawling events were huge events. Yes. I remember going to Farmington, and there would be over 100 cars that would show up. The first day was chaos. Out of 100 cars, there was only 12 that were going to go on to the second day. So when you were competing, you were competing against a lot of people. Towards the end of when I was rock crawling, it was fading back a little, fading off a little bit. I was actually still going out to a lot of the events and just spectating them because I knew so many people there, but I wasn't competing. But I still had interest in it, and I would go out and do some stuff. And I was still doing, like I said, I was working with ESPN doing some. I wasn't the color. There was another guy that did color. Okay. I was kind of the guy that knew about the cars and how they worked, and the technical guy that knew everything about the cars, about the rear end, about the traction, about the different lockers, about the water on the tires, and on those ESPN shows. That's the part. They always had another. There was two different color guys that would work that would make jokes and try to keep it interesting. I was always the technical side of it, just talking about the competition.
Which was important because the spectator needed to know what was going on. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And now I have a guy that does our announcing at the events, and he's he knows the technical end and he's good with the color, so he's able to do both. So I don't have to have 2 or 3 guys. But the sport is growing again. Luckily, we used to have with Cal Rocks and then We Rock, we'd have up to 85 cars until the economy crash in 07, 08. And then we dropped down to, at times, we were lucky sometimes to get on the East Coast 12 cars. And now we just did our first Arizona event before this COVID came in, first event of the season. And we had 52 cars back competing. That was really good numbers. And if everybody would have shown up if they'd have finished their cars or made the trip instead of saying, I'm only going to catch 3 of the 4, we probably could have had somewhere around 70 to 75 cars. It's looking good again, at least in the West Coast, the Western section. The East Coast is still a little bit down. They haven't really recovered as fast. But there's still a lot of trail wheelers out there that come out to the events. So we're happy to see that. So then moving on, you guys, that the whole off-road part of your industry became pretty strong. Then you got into the go fast stuff with King of the Hammers. Before Ultra 4, it was just King of the Hammers. Yeah, well, we were continued to be into off-roading, doing different stuff. But we've been a long-time sponsor of Shannon Campbell. So when King of the Hammers came along, I was actually invited to go out and do the original King of the Hammers with Bart Dixon and all those guys. And at the time, I go, I didn't have a rock crawler. I'd sold my rock crawler. I had a really super nice Jeep I built. It was more of like a sand lightweight Jeep. I called it a rock rod, and then found out that somebody else was calling their stuff rock rods. But it was a narrow-bodied, aluminum-bodied Jeep I built that I actually had, but I really didn't set it up to do like really heavy-duty rock crawling, and the suspension wasn't dialed in for that. I was using it out in the sand dunes and doing some lighter-weight rock crawling and different stuff. Yeah, when King of the Hammers came along, me and my brothers would go out and kind of support Shannon. We'd build stuff for him. He would be out there, when rock crawling went to rock racing, and then it went to basically to Ultra 4,
there was like a transition period. We had rock crawling, and then we were doing these kind of rock races that were kind of extreme. Next thing you know, these guys are jumping these cars and whatever. It's pulling some other people into the sport other than the rock crawler group. So there's a lot of guys that were into maybe desert racing that got sucked into Ultra 4 racing. So we were involved with Shannon doing that stuff. My nephew at this point is getting old enough where he was racing short course. He had actually borrowed a car from Shannon to race in King of the Hammers. And I actually, one time he borrowed a single seat car and did King of the Hammers. I think he actually he may have finished second or third or something in one of Shannon's cars. Another year, he borrowed a car from Shannon, and I rode with him as the navigator. We had a bunch of problems with as I remember, we had a bunch of problems with the car. The fuel pump, something kept dying, and so we finished, but we finished at like 10 o'clock at night. I think we're like the last finisher. So that was another time. And then there was another time I rode with him in a rear engine car that Shannon had. It was a car that Waylon actually totaled at Utah. Shannon, or Casey and I competed in that car in King of the Hammers, and it was a rough ride. I don't know if you remember when it was the one where they qualified going up Chocolate Thunder.
Right.
And everybody would get stuck at those first couple big rocks right at the bottom.
Yep.
And yeah, when we went to qualify, sure enough, we drove in there, got stuck at those, and we finally got out of it. And I think we qualified like 90 something. It was terrible. But we got in the race and actually moved way up and finished the race. I don't know what we finished that year, but we actually did okay in the car. But the car, I just remember going on the last lap out, we were so beat up from the car. The tires Casey had put on it, he was sponsored by BFG at the time, I think it was. And he had these 41-inch tall military tires on the car. They weren't available to the public, but they were tall and they were like truck tires. And the thing just beat the crap out of us, so, but we finished, and I don't think we had flat. So he was, Casey was involved in it, and I was helping him as much as they needed. At this point, I wasn't pretty much just helping those guys do it. We were just out there supporting Casey, and right. Currie was sponsoring Casey. So it was whatever we do to, support Casey. It was just one of those deals. Whatever Casey was doing was the right thing, and whatever I was doing was the wrong thing. So, but I kind of went along with it. I'm a team player. If we make a decision, going and we're out, whether I agree with it or not, I was a team player. I followed, I gave it my 100% no matter what it was. So we were going to every King of the Hammers starting way back. I don't know what the first one we went to. I think I went to every one except for the original one. But I was invited to go to that one and didn't go. King of Hammers decided to do their Everyman Challenge, or come up with a modified class. Gerald from Savvy approached me about building a car and entering into the EMC, right, or the Everyman Challenge. So they came up with the 4600 car and then the 4500 cars. So Gerald wanted to build a 4600 car, and I was going to help him build it, and I didn't, at that time, I had no idea how involved I was going to get back into it. But basically, we looked at all the different cars that we could build and came up, we thought the LJ would be the best platform for us to build our race car on. And he brought a pretty nice LJ over to the shop, and I told him, you realize this will never be a street Jeep again. And he goes, yeah, I'm willing to go all the way. So I go, because it's going to be a race car now. So we basically took that car. I actually took the car home and started cutting it up. And we took it all apart and actually cut even out of the inside of the body. And I don't even think they allow this anymore. We took all the structure out of the inside of the body. So the body was just the skin. And it still had a floor plan, so the body, everything was still there. But anything that we could cut out of it, we cut out of it. And then we had a guy that we had hired to build a cage and do some of the work on it. When I had it at my house, I set up the front and rear suspension on it and all the steering on it. We took it to a guy to help us build the cage. So the guy had the car, and he was supposed to pretty much finish the car. And the guy was down in Oceanside. So every week, me and Gerald would take a trip down there to check on the progress on the car. And so it got to be about Thanksgiving, and we're going, look, me and Gerald going, this guy's not going to finish this car. We want to have the car done by the first of the year, and we realized he's not going to finish the car. There's no way. He's not making enough progress. So we went and picked up that car and brought it back. Gerald and I pretty much ended up finishing the car ourselves. That was the first year of the EMC. Took that little black LJ, went out. They had the drawing for your start positions at Off-Road Expo.
Yep.
We drew number 40, start position number 40, last. There was only 40 cars. So anyways, Falcon Tire was there, and they drew like start position number 3 or 4 or something in the top 10. And we're going, well, if we run Falcon tires, we could possibly start up towards the front of the pack instead of at the very last of the pack. So we kind of teamed up with Falcon Tire at that point. So thinking,
that's how that went. Okay.
Yeah, that's how it went. Because the original time when we went testing in the car, I think we had BFGs on it. And then Falcon Tire, they were interested in teaming up with us, and we said, we don't need Falcon Tire. Anybody's going to give us tires, but they have something else that might be of value to us. So we ended up teaming up with Falcon Tire, but when it came to race day, basically Dave Cole says, well, the start position goes with the driver. And you drew start position, whatever, I think it was 40. It's 39 or 40. And we go, okay, whatever. I'm not one of those guys that gets overexcited about anything and starts crying about it. I just, I'll take what you give me.
Right.
If that's what the way it is going to be, is that's the way it's going to be. So, but we had done a bunch of testing with that car before. We got the car done, I think, right around the first of the year, over probably the Christmas holidays. Went out, done a bunch of shock tuning to the car, ended up changing all the springs on the car, and got the car to where it actually really worked. It had more up travel in the front than most other cars out there. We weren't concerned. I think the class allowed, 14 inches of wheel travel, and we had 12 front and rear, and we were happy with that. And we couldn't really get any more than that, the way the thing was set up. And the car was super stable. Gerald had bought a big motor from the car, so we had a roller motor from, I don't know, the guy out of Alabama, I forget the guy's name. So we had was making some good, it maybe made, I don't know, maybe 300, maybe 350 horsepower. It felt like it had some power. We're out there, come out to the lake. Now we know we're going to start in the back, so we're taking what they gave us. So we're out doing some testing in the car, and all of a sudden it just stopped. It stops running. It'll barely run. It would barely run over an idle. And we're trying to figure out, hey, something's gone wrong in this car. We can't figure it out. And this is like, I think 2 days before the race. I remember Gerald and I were working on the car, and it was freezing cold. You know how it gets cold at night out to that lake?
Yep.
So it was getting cold, and I said, Gerald, let's load the car up. Let's take it to my house. We could put it in the garage. It's going to be warmer there. We have lights. So we loaded the car up, started heading back towards Anaheim. And when we were racing Jeep Speed, there was a guy that used to help us work on our Jeep Speed cars. He was a Jeep mechanic. His last name was Beal, and I can't think of his first name. So we got him on the phone, and we told him, hey, meet me at my house. We got a problem with this car. We get down there, start working on the car. We had some other issues when we were pre-running. We bent like a coil spring bucket and some different stuff. And I said, it'll be a lot easier for me to fix it in my own garage. This isn't at Currie. This is at my house.
Right.
For me to fix it in my own garage where I have tools and everything, than trying to fix it in the dark out here where we have nothing. So we hauled it home. He met us there. He started working on it, told us, well, the problem is your ECU took a dump. The computer is no good. And Gerald's all, well, I have another LJ at my house. I'll go home and get it. He goes to get the LJ from his house, parks in my driveway. We pull the ECU and the distributor out of that and bolt it in this car. Okay, that was the problem. The ECU had dumped for some reason. Because I think it had been reprogrammed, and somehow it got messed up. So we got the car running, got it, everything, all that good. I spent another couple hours. I fixed reinforced my spring buckets, welded it back together. And I figured, well, Gerald will drive back because I drove there. So now we're heading back to the lake. This is stuff you always do when racing. So we're heading back to the lake. We leave the house at like 11:30 midnight, and we're heading back to the lake. We get up to Yucca. We stop and get gas, and we're heading from Yucca out to the lake. You know, that's what, 20 miles.
Right.
So we leave the gas station. We're heading out there, and I'm like falling asleep in the passenger seat. Gerald, we're going down the road. He drives out the side of the road, slams on the brakes and stops, and goes, I can't drive a foot farther because I'm falling asleep. I'm going to kill both of us. And I look at him and go, you're kidding me. He goes, we are literally 5 miles from there. So I get in, I drive out to the lake, and, you know, we get out there. I forget what time it was. It was early in the morning. You know, we just go to bed, get up the next morning, and then took the car out and realized that the computer that we had put in the car had the rev limiter stock, I think, is set at like 5,200 on a stock 4-liter. Well, now this car doesn't even make any horsepower. The rev limiter, it didn't even start making power until like 55 to 50 or to 6,000 RPM or something. But the rev limiter is stuck at 52. And I go, you know, so we're out, you know, we were working, I think, with Crawl Magazine. They wanted to do a feature on the car, so we're out there doing some hot laps in it. And that's when we realized that as soon as you hit 5,200 RPM, it goes into like a limp mode and just starts backfiring and spinning and stuff. So we spent the rest of that day trying to run down somebody to reprogram it. Nobody had a tuner for it. We figured, okay, well, we're just going to run what we got. And so we get in line, we line up, we're basically dead last starting at the end of this, you know. And when Gerald jumped in the car, all the communication wires were mounted on the side of they were kind of mounted on the side of it was inside the car, but on the side of the cage.
Right.
And when he went to put his foot down, he rubbed all the fuses and knocked 2 or 3 fuses out of the side. So and the car wouldn't even start. So he got down there and he's plugging fuses in. We asked somebody who was standing there. Somebody walked by we knew and said, hey, reach down here. Can you plug these fuses in? They plugged some fuses in. We got the car running again. So we pull up the starting line, and our radio is not working. We could talk to each other. Gerald and I could talk to each other. So the intercom between him and I was on, but the radio wasn't working back to our pit. We had no radio.
So the fuse was in the wrong spot.
Yeah, it wasn't even in there. So we put up the starting line. Dave Cole says, well, take all the time you want to fix it, you know, because, you know, your start time doesn't actually start until you actually cross the starting line. So we played with it longer, couldn't get it fixed. So we basically left there with no radio working, figuring we don't want to get too far behind because we got a lot of people in front of us that we're going to pass. So we leave the starting line anyways in the dust behind all these cars, and this car actually worked really good for the Jeep. And so we start passing people, and Gerald's trying to count these people as we're passing him. He's going 1, 2, 3, and we had pre-runs. We knew where we were going, and the car worked really good. So on like the fast stuff, it was faster than most cars out there. So we're going up Pummel Pass. By the time we got to the top of Pummel Pass, we had probably passed 10 cars. And then now we're starting to catch up with the 4,500 cars. We get over there to whatever that dry lake is out there that was the first time that you came down the hill and crossed the dry lake. This year they crossed the dry lake and went up it. I can't remember the name of that dry lake. You know, by the time we got there, we couldn't see anybody in front of us. Whoever was in front of us was far enough in front of us, we weren't even in their dust. Well, we have no radio, so we make the big long loop, and then we come back to like pit 2, where pit 2B would be. And right when we got there, we had caught up with a car. So remember, we have no radio, but we have people waiting in the pit for us. And so we had caught up with the car when we got there, and that car turned into the pit. And I go, you know what? We've been chasing the guy in his dust for this long. I'm not going to pit. Let's just keep going. We got enough gas. We can make the round and get back to this pit. Okay? We basically, you know, just we didn't pull into the pit. We went by the pit and kept going because, clean air. We got enough gas. Everything's working. The only thing we don't have is a radio. So we continued on. We went up into Fissure Mountain. And at this time, we were behind one of the guys that's still racing. He's racing the 4,800 class. I think Mike, I can't think of his name right now. No, Brandon Johnson. I think that's it. So, or is it Mike Johnson? One of those guys. So anyways, he's in the 40 or the 4,500 class, and we're in the 4,600 class. So we're coming up on Fissure Mountain, and I tell Gerald, I go, well, the rocks are really, really sharp up here. We're going to just kind of back out of it. I'm not going to try to chase him down because I think if we do, we're going to get a flat tire. So we kind of backed off of it a little bit. And right as we were coming down into Jackhammer, from the top of Jackhammer, he got a flat tire. So he pulled off. So we ended up passing him right there. So now we're going across the top of Jackhammer, the top of Sledgehammer, heading over to go down Jack North. And so we're heading down Jack North. And we could see that there's another car in front of us, but he's out there a ways. And so we're heading down Jack North, and this car's got 35-inch tall tires on it. We get down to the bottom, and there's Dave Cole. And Dave Cole kind of waves us over, and he tells us, Dave Cole goes, be careful, there's a bunch of spectators down here on the course. Just be careful and go by them. And you guys are in second overall. That's what Dave Cole told us. And we're going, second overall? Are you kidding me? We're in second overall? So we continue on because we see there's another car in front of us, but we don't know where we're at. We have no radio. Gerald and I could only talk to each other. So we have no idea where we're at. We cut across and go down to Big Johnson. And so we're going up Big Johnson, and now we can see that car. We're at the bottom of Big Johnson, and they're basically about midway up Big Johnson. And we go, oh, that's Larry McRae. That's Poison Spider car. I go, oh, man. So we're cruising up Big Johnson right there, and I think we started to get stuck, I know what it was. We had a flat tire at the bottom of Big Johnson. So Gerald is, I told him, I think I can make it with just the flat back to the pit, because now all we want to go is short distance and get to the pit. I'm trying to think if this is the right year. No, that's the wrong year. Okay. No, yeah, that was the year after. We raced it in the 40. We actually stepped that car up to the 4,500 car. But anyways, we could see Larry McRae up there. So we cruised up to the top. Right when we get to the top, Larry McRae's pulled off the road, and they're working on their car. They had some problem with the steering. So when we passed him, we knew we were leading at that point. Down to the pit, which was now, pit 2A, or the one down in the valley in that wash there where they always have that pit. Stopped there, got gas, and the guys are looking at the tire. Go, yeah, this tire's got a cut on it. Do you guys want us to change the tire? I said, go ahead and change the tire. We don't want to take any chances, because all we had to do is drive back to the finish line from there. And basically, we drove to the finish line and came across the finish line, and won overall the EMC that year in that 4,600 car. Yeah,
starting at the very end, behind everybody, and then finishing first place overall and the physical leader. That was awesome.
And with no radio, so it was quite an experience.
So your pit crews had no idea. You had no idea where you were at. You had no idea where they didn't know where you were at, except on a tracker.
Right. So we came down in the pit, and they told us, "Hey, you guys are leading." Okay, just relax. Make sure we have plenty of gas and whatever, and went to the finish line and ended up winning. And then Gerald wanted to run that car again. I told him, I've already won that class. There's only one direction to go once you win a class like that, and that is to go, is to not win it. And you go, why would I want to go back and race the same car in the same class? We've already done that. So he goes, well, why don't we race it in the 40? We'll step it up to the next class, into the 4,500 class. We were out. We decided to run it in the 4,500 class, the same exact car. So we were out pre-running in the car, and now we had the other computer back in it, the one that allowed us to go up to whatever it was, 7,000 RPM.
Right.
So we're out pre-running it and blow the motor up.
Oh, geez.
So now we got this car, and we were going to run in the 4,500 class. Well, the 4,500 class allows you to, change the motor. So we ended up taking that hopped up 6-cylinder out. He actually sold that, I think, to Brandon Johnson, the same guy that we were competing at. That we ended up, he ended up getting a flat, and we ended up winning that race. He sold that engine to him, and we put LS3 in that car. And then when we drew for starting positions that next year, we drew starting position 10. And then we were thinking, shoot, we could probably win from here again in that car. So that was that black LJ. So we stepped it from the 4,600 class up to the 4,500 class, and then we won the next year overall as well, in that same exact car.
That's awesome.
And then at the end of that race, everybody's saying, well, the course isn't rough enough. The course needs to be rougher. People complaining that we won 2 years in a row, that they need to make the course rougher or whatever. And that's when I decided that we would build a new car. And I had an idea for a new car that we would build a race in the 4,500 class. Back in those days, there was the 4,600s was the modified stock.
Right.
Then they were basic 4,600s were stock. Then they had the mod class, which was the 4,500 car, which they allowed you to, it had to look like a Jeep, but it didn't need to have, like, you could make your own frame, but you had to have mechanical steering in it.
Yes.
And you're limited 2 shocks per wheel, and the biggest shock could be a 2.5-inch shock. So that was the class. Then they had what they called the Legends class, which was supposed to be a 4,400 car that was dropped down, but there was limitations on the Legends, single shock per wheel,
and tire size,
and 37-inch tall tire. And then remember, they also had the 4,700s,
right?
Which
class.
was the spec class. So anyways, I decided, well, I have an idea to build a new car. And Gerald, he's pretty much all in. Let's build this new car. So I actually drew the car out, or the frame for the car out, in my garage. I drew it on a big piece of paper. And at this point, Gerald had moved in with my nephew, and they had a shop down the street from our shop here in Corona. And then so basically, I had drawn the frame rails out because they were all cut out of 2x3 square tubing.
Right.
And we started cutting that car up, and we built that whole car in a year. We had it at SEMA. And I remember my dad was, after he had a stroke and stuff, he looked at that car and goes, you guys will never finish it. I think when somebody tells me that I can't do something, it just drives me to make sure I do it. And we built that car in 1 year and had it at SEMA that year. It was actually at the very front of the tire building in Falcon's booth.
Right.
And do you know, when we won that race that year, it was the first time Falcon had ever won any off-road race at all. And it was the first time that we had Greg Mulkey's wheels on it.
The race lines, yeah.
It was the first time Raceline had ever won any Ultra 4 event, I think, on their wheels.
Wow.
So, and we were running a set of all-terrain Falcons. They hadn't come out with their MT yet. Remember, if you look back at the pictures, they were all-terrain that were cut.
Yep.
The Falcon tires. So there's a couple firsts in that, So anyway, we went on to build it's known as the 88 car now. And the reason it's 88 is because Gerald is Asian, and that, the 8s are lucky numbers for him. Okay. So it was a 4488, but it's known as the 88 car. And then we built that car. We took it to SEMA that year. We ended up winning EMC class again overall in that car, Gerald riding with me. And then the next year, my son drove that car. He won overall in that car. Him and Jordan Pellegrino had a race to the end, and then my son won in that car. And then after that, this was one of those deals that I was wanting to get into a 4,400 car or something a little bit. Once I've won something, I kind of want to move on to something else.
Right.
So we had won the 4,600. We had won the 4,500 car, our class, in the black car, and then we won it in the 88 car. And then my son did it, and I wanted to go on and build a 4,400 car. And so we were working on a 4,400 car. Jessie Combs got in that 88 car, and she went on to win, I don't think she won overall, but I think she won the 4,500 class in it.
Correct.
And then she also ran it in the 4,400 class, and then now Dan Fresh is raced it the last either 2 or 3 years. I think he won the 4,500 class last year, but now in Ultra 4, it seems like the 4,800 cars have kind of, they're building specific cars in that class now, and they've kind of picked up the pace. So, and that car is getting to be kind of old. That car last year is running on the same exact rear ends on it that we ran the very first year. Wow. The front end was the same exact one. We had two actually rear ends we built. We had a Dana 60 and a Dana 70 for the rear. The 1 year that we won the EMC class, it had the Dana 60 in the back, and then Casey raced that same car in the 4,400 class. I think he finished 10th that year. We put a Dana 70 in the back for him because he was running the 40s on it instead of the 37-inch tall tires. Right. So that car's got a lot of history. It's been raced a lot of times, and it's won a lot of races. It's probably, I don't think there's any other car that's won as much as that car is won. And it's just been a super reliable car. But Gerald still has that car, and actually they're doing some OG13 race thing out there next week that Gerald and I are going to compete in that car again.
Oh, that's good to hear. I didn't know that you were involved in that. I
wasn't involved in it, but Gerald asked me to come and drive the car.
Excellent. I had gotten sent a text message, got on by accident, and so I knew that race was not a race. I knew that was going on. Yeah. And so I was going to make plans to go out there with the Bronco, Bronco buggy that JR raced in the original OG 13 race. And
right, yeah. Huh?
Now I've made other plans, so I'm not going to be out there, but the guy who owns it, Damon Hopper, is taking it out there, and he and JR are going to be driving in that race as well with that old buggy.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's happening now. I know that you guys had the three brothers were running the business, and now the kids have all moved up and are involved in different parts of the businesses, and business dynamic has changed.
Yeah, and it's just a way that we could continue on. There's a lot to that story. About 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, I told my brothers, hey, I want to go do something else. I want to be able to do something with my son. I've been in business with you guys ever since I got out of high school. And, I want to, we need to figure out how we're going to either move on through this business or where it's going to go from here. So we kind of decided, well, let's, one thing we do, since they didn't want to buy me out or anything, didn't really have the money to buy me out, we decided, well, let's market the company. Let's see if we could sell it. So we went through a big process of valuing the company and marketing the company for like a year, but we never really got an offer that we felt was good. And one of the reasons being is we do so many things at Currie did so many things. We have military contracts. We're building runs for street rods. We're building runs for the off-road industry. We do suspension, steering, sway bars. We do all these different things. And some of the feedback we're getting back from the people that were in this is, you do too much stuff. It would be for somebody to come in and take you guys over. You're not really a rear end business. You're not really a suspension business. There's like too much going on. So I think in that, it kind of devalued the company, because people were afraid to, and nobody was making an offer saying, hey, I want to buy that part and not, because we might have been interested in selling a piece of it, to just cut it down or whatever. So we were talking about it, me and my brothers were talking about it one day, and he said, well, we had got some offers, but nothing, that we would, that would really work for us, because, by the time you sell it and you pay all the taxes and everything, you don't end up with that much left. Right. And I'm 63. My older brother is 64. He'll be 65 in September this year. And Ray's the youngest of all of us, and I think he turned 60 last year. I think he'll be 61 in the end of July, I believe. Right. So anyways, we were just kind of looking at stuff and talking about what we're going to do, where we're going from here. And Raymond said, he goes, I kind of look at the numbers, and you go, and he kind of brings up the suspension side of the company is like about over 30% of the company. And that's suspension, steering, and sway bars. That, as far as dollar volume wise, is like 31% of the company. And he's all, would you be interested in taking that part of the company over as yours? And I go, well, I was thinking about it. Well, if my son would be interested in doing it because he wants to do something different. My son is an engineer, a manufacturing engineer. He spent the big part of his career working at Oakley, doing sunglasses and RX glasses. And everything that he was doing was 100% made overseas. The design work was done here, but the manufacturing, the tooling, the boxing, and everything is done from over there. So he was going back and forth from here to Italy, from here to China, doing different stuff. And then he had taken a job with a startup, another sunglass company as a startup, because basically they offered him so much money he couldn't refuse it.
Right.
And he'd been working there for a couple of years. And he goes, yeah, when I first started working, it was really exciting. We were moving forward. We had all these projects working on. But now, the owners of this company are so indecisive all the time. We get something completely designed, and then at the last minute before we're ready to release it, they want to change it. So, so he was getting a little frustrated. And he goes, and he was saying, I wouldn't mind doing something else. And that, said, well, I asked him, well, would you be interested in doing something with this? And he said, yes. He's always been into, my son raced, I don't know if you don't know the back history of him.
No.
But my son was a world champion on a motorized scooter. So he rode for a company called GoPed when he was in high school. And he did that. And then at his last year of high school, or the last couple of years of high school, we started racing AMA Supermoto. And he rode professionally for Yamaha for I think 3 years. Wow. As a professional motorcycle racer. And he won, I think, 2 championships and had 1 undefeated year on a supermoto bike. So anyways, and when he was racing in high school, he was getting his college degree. So he had a degree in engineering. So when his racing career ended in, I think, 2009, he was basically out of high school. He went to work. He had his degree, and so he got a job at Oakley. Oakley was one of his sponsors. So had no work experience, though. So he went to Oakley as a test technician. So a test technician, what they do is they test glasses. They perform all kinds of, corrosive, deals. They shoot projectiles through the lenses. They test the hinges. So he went there as a test technician. Within 3 months after he got there, one of the engineers had left, and they approached him and said, "Hey, we got this position that just opened up as an engineer. You fit the profile perfectly." And he goes, well, I've only been working here like 3 months, and I've never been, I don't have that much experience. His boss at Oakley said they basically hired him for that position, but his boss that he was working for says, "Well, I want you to work for me for at least 6 months, and you could work here as a test, because I want you to learn what you're doing here before you move into that engineering position." So he did that. I think he worked at Oakley for 5 or 6 years. When he left there, he was a senior engineer.
Nice.
Anyways, I have to take a second because I get a little emotional.
Into spinning off parts of the business.
Right. So anyways, I asked him, "Hey, would you want to come to do something with me if we did this deal? It should be, I can't do it by myself, and I'm not even interested in doing it myself, because what I've always done here was product development. I've never been involved in the, like the business part of it, other than my brother and his wife pretty much ran that part. When we moved from Anaheim to Corona, my job was to run the warehouse, the machine shop, and the new products division. So I had the engineers working for me. I had the warehouse manager working for me, and I also ran the machine shop here.
Okay.
So I've never been involved in the finance and the money part of it, other than, I basically got a paycheck and was able to go out and do the stuff I wanted to do with my own vehicles and build my own vehicles and whatever. And then I also dealt with the media, as far as, doing different stuff with the media. If there's something that we needed to go out and do, I was usually the one that went out and did it. Since I was a 33 1/3 owner of the company, and the Rock Jock side of the company was 31%, we decided to do a carve out. So we basically carved off all that suspension side of the company, and I took that, and then basically, which was 31%, and I took the warehouse and made that, now it's Rock Jock, and I kept the whole machine shop, so I'm still running the machine shop. And then my daughter is a CPA.
Nice.
So Brandon came here to work here about this time, well, right before we went to Moab last year. So April of last year, he started. So, and then my daughter came in, I think she started here about August. And we quickly realized after she came here, we should have brought her in a lot earlier, because we would have been way ahead. So it's luckily we did bring her in, because she's been able to get us going. Because we basically had a company we had customers, but we had no infrastructure here at all. We had no shipping. We had no office. We had to build an office. We had, set up our whole deal. I kept a bunch of my key employees that were working for me. I kept those. And then some of the people went with Currie. So we're still in the same building, and Currie still has part of the warehouse in this building. And then, but Currie basically is doing all rear ends now. And then Rock Jock is doing basically suspension. So the Johnny joint, the anti-rock sway bar, the correct link, all that is products of Rock Jock. And Rock Jock was actually trademarked, I think, in 2000, either 5 or 6. But Currie's been building products for the Jeep market since, like I said, since about the mid '80s.
Right.
Well, so, and all the products were my products. Anyways, and that's my brother said. Well, everything that you guys have, that's all stuff that it's your stuff. You developed it. But I also developed the Rock Jock rear end. The Dana 70, that was all done when I was, under, my product development in Currie.
Well, it's awesome that you guys were able to come to be able to do that as a family, so that you could take your kids and bring them in, and then they have something, you can leave them a legacy. So
right.
Kind of like your dad did with the 3 of you. So when I first heard that you guys were splitting, I was surprised, but then it made total sense with, everybody having their kids and trying to figure out how to move things along. I know that a lot of families that have big property, when the parents or the patriarchs move on or pass away, whatever you want to say, that all of a sudden there's becomes a lot of infighting over the
right.
property and who's going to deal with what. And we had a property owner in Arizona that wanted us to buy their piece of property, but I couldn't come up with the money to buy 880 acres in Arizona that
right.
a superior off-road park, and then the wife died and the kids all started fighting, and dad was, just swept up in the fighting, and it was a shame. But
yeah. And that we were looking at that, and I mean, one of our goals was, hey, we all want to remain to be family and friends, and because we all have a lot of similar interests that we still do. You
right.
know, like even this year, I was supposed to drive Casey's race car on the last lap of King of the Hammers, and they ended up blowing the motor in the first lap, so I never got there. We're still involved with them. If we're going to be racing in Mexico, I still plan on doing that stuff and the same stuff, and then also doing our own stuff as well, moving forward in what we're doing. My daughter just bought her first Jeep, so we fixed her up a Jeep, and then And like I said, my son's always been involved in this. He's always gone to Moab with us when he was a little kid, and he's been around it. But I mean, they're well qualified to run this place. I mean, I can never do it by myself. It would be beyond me to try to do it with as much as we've got going on. We're basically shipping about, I think it's about $500,000 a month out of this place.
Wow.
So just to keep up with everything that's going on here, before the COVID thing, I think we had 22 people working here. And we've slimmed down a little bit now because of the COVID, but we're still running strong. We're still doing good. So and then we're actually military contractors as well. So we never shut down. We have to stay running. So there's some jobs that we do. There's some of our suspension stuff that the military uses. So we're still doing work for the DoD and different companies.
Excellent. Well, John, I want to thank you for joining and telling the history and where things are at now. I really appreciate your friendship over the years and the advice that you've given me. I don't know if you remember all the times that I've called and asked about how I should deal with rules or a number of things. You've always been good and solid that way, and I appreciate it. You guys as a family and yourself have really supported and been involved with the four-wheel drive community. You've made that community a family for a lot of us. And I want to say thank you.
I think the way that we did it, because we were so involved, we took basically a hobby and made it into a business. And after a while, everything becomes a business, and that you've
Yes.
pretty much done the same thing. But at the same time, you have to learn to enjoy it and take advantage of the stuff that you've created and stuff that you've done. And for me, it's, now that I've got, I brought my kids in, it really makes it really nice. So I can leave everything to them, and I think it's going to be in good hands. So, and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still doing product development here.
Excellent.
So I haven't really, other than I own the whole thing. It's 100% mine. Whatever we do is ours. I'm still kind of doing the same thing. So, but I bring, my son's experience with him as being an engineer and working in the outside world, and then also my daughter, from her experience. My daughter's actually older than my son, but she worked as a CPA for Ernst & Young, I think, for 5 years, and went to a couple different deals. And we were kind of excited when we told her what we wanted to do and that she could be part of it. We didn't know for sure if she wanted to be part of it, but she's here 100% now, and so it's all good.
That's excellent. Well, again, John, thank you very much for spending your over 2 hours with us. That's awesome. I wish you guys and the whole family, everybody all the way across, the brothers and the nephews and your kids, the best of luck. I will let you know when we're going to air this, and so that you can share it with your friends and customers. We look forward to sharing your history with everyone. Thank you so much.
Well, if you ever feel like that there's a gap in there that we missed something, you can always call me and ask me, hey, what happened between here and here? So
all right,
feel free to call.
Do. All right, John, thank you.
All right, thank you, Rich.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.